Hi, my name is Ali Mann from AQM Speech and Language Therapy. Thanks for watching today. I wanted to do this video because it's been on my mind a lot recently. I thought I would talk about the kind of difficulties that we see in children when they have delayed language or language disorders. And I wanted to do it for a couple of reasons. Excuse me. Firstly, because unfortunately children don't come with a user manual, which would be really helpful if they did. And as parents, although we're expected to have superhuman powers and know all things and get everything right all the time, we don't. And unless we are a professional that has a lot of knowledge about developmental milestones, sometimes we just don't know that our child is not doing the things that they should be doing by that age. And when we go on and diagnose older children with language disorders, lots of parents say, oh, I really wish I'd known. They feel bad because they didn't know what to look out for, and they understand that if they had known, they would have got their child's support much sooner. And I always say to those mums and dads, please don't feel guilty. You didn't know, that's the whole point. And when you did know, you did your best and you got help for your child when you could. So that's one reason why I wanted to do the video. The other thing is that sometimes you do have an instinct that your child is not doing what they should be by a certain age, but your concerns are dismissed. People will say to you things like, oh, you know, all children are different, which is true. You can't compare them to other kids, which is true. And sometimes you might get a referral, go to your GP or see your health visitor, and they'll say, oh, let's give it a bit of time. Now, as a speech and language therapist, I say that sometimes to parents. But the one thing I have noticed in my practice is that parents can have an instinct for when things are not going right. And it's not helpful if that's dismissed by a professional, or if you're told come back in 6 months, because that's 6 months when you're not supporting your child isn't getting the help they need, and that's 6 months of anxiety for you. So before I go on to talk about some of the signs that you can see in children who have difficulties understanding and using language, I just want to clarify one thing. Lots of people use the term speech and language interchangeably, and there is a difference between the two. So we do this really cool thing as parents when we're teaching our very young children language. We will show them lots of objects that we think are interesting, and we will accompany the object, we'll accompany with it a lovely sing-songy label. So for example, we might show them a red shiny ball and say ball, or show them a cup and say cup. Now the k, p, that's a sound string, that's the speech element. The thing, the vessel that holds liquid that we're showing them, we match the two together, we form a representation and we store it in our brain. The object and the representation that we formed, that's the language element. So if I was to say to you now, ¿Cómo te llama? Or ¿Cuál es su nombre? Unless you speak Spanish, you won't know that I've just asked you your name, because language is a shared code. It's you send out a message, somebody decodes it, they receive the message, they decode it and they understand it, and they might send a message back. And that's what language is. It's a shared code. It can be spoken, it can be written, it can be signed, it can be symbols, but basically it's a code that people understand. If you have difficulties with language, then you're really at a huge disadvantage, because we use language for expressing thoughts and feelings, for asking questions, giving instructions, getting clarification. And if you find those things hard, then everything in life is going to be much harder for you. So what I want to do now is just talk you through some of the things that might indicate if your child has problems with language. I'm going to just think a little bit about what you might see in a 2 and 3 year old, and then what you might see in an older child. Okay, so I've got some notes because I don't want to forget anything. So early signs in a 2-year-old. These are the things that we look for as a speech and language therapist. and things that act as red flags for us if we see that children are not able to do them. So by the age of 2, a typical child should be able to use 50 words. They'll have 50 words in their vocabulary, although they will understand many, many more. And they will be putting together very basic 2 or 3 word sentences. So baby cry, bye bye daddy, want drink, more juice. And also between the ages of 2 and 3, children will start to respond to really basic instructions, and as parents we kind of take it for granted. We'll say, get your shoes, where's your cup, where's Teddy? If your child is not responding or does not appear to understand the basic instructions that you're giving them, then that's a red flag. If you name things and your child can't point to them, so if you say, where are your eyes? And your child doesn't point to their eyes, then that shows you that they don't understand what you've said. If you find it difficult to get their attention, get them to listen to you, and to remain attending to you, then that's a cause for concern. There are quite a lot of functions that underpin language development, such as attention and listening, hearing, memory. And when we're working on language targets with children, almost always we find that those children have difficulties with attention and listening, and it's often one of the first things that we work on, and it's one of the first things that you'll see delayed development in. Okay, so if your child at 2 has a limited range of speech sounds, that is also a cause for concern. Now, I know I said speech and language are different. Well, they are, but they're actually connected. We use one with the other. So if your child is only using a very basic number of speech sounds and they don't have as full a range as they should do by that age, that's a red flag. If your child is 3 and you can understand them and close family members can understand them, but other people can't and are constantly saying, what did they say? Then that is also a red flag. That shows that there's some difficulty there. And if your child doesn't make eye contact, then that's a huge cause for concern. So let me fast forward now to the age of sort of 4, 5, even upwards, and talk through some of the things that you'll see in children who have issues with language. Okay, so if your child is not responding appropriately to instructions, go and put this on the table, go and find your school bag, and they can't follow your instructions and execute them, then that is an indicator that they've got difficulty understanding what you're saying. Now, as parents, we often think our kids understand everything, but we don't realise that actually they're looking at lots of contextual cues. They're looking at your non-verbal language. You're pointing to something, or it's part of a normal routine. So sometimes it's good to give them instruction that is not supported in those ways and see if they can understand that. If your child has poor attention and listening skills, then that's a red flag. If your child has a limited vocabulary, then that's an indicator that things are not developing the way they should. Excuse me. We often find that with children who have delayed language, that they actually don't know, or they have disordered language, actually don't know that many words. If your child doesn't initiate conversations, they sit back and wait for the adult or another child or their peer to do all the work, then that's a red flag. Sometimes we find children with language difficulties can often appear to be in a world of their own, simply because they can't communicate. I mean, when I go to a foreign country and I don't speak the language, then I don't interact as much with the people around me as I would normally, because I feel powerless. Okay, so if they don't, sometimes we find children with language issues can be quite passive. They don't ask for help. So in the classroom, they'll sit back. They don't understand what the teacher said, and they'll just sit there and wait for an adult to notice that they're not doing what they have been told to do, and they'll come and help them then. So a lot of children with language issues are very passive. They don't ask for help. That's a red flag. Sometimes what we see is the opposite. Actually, that child who doesn't understand will start behaving badly. You'll see challenging behaviour, lots of poor behaviour, simply because they're frustrated, and that's the only way they know to express it. Sometimes children with language issues can have really low confidence, and that comes from knowing that they're not able to do the things that their peers are doing. Now, we often find children with language difficulties can be really disorganised. And you're probably listening to this thinking, yeah, well, lots of kids are disorganised. I mean, they lose things constantly. They don't have the things they need when they need them. They've lost their pencil, they've lost their ruler, they can't find their pieces of paper, they've lost their book, they've left it at home. They don't always execute tasks properly in the right order. They have messy bedrooms. Now, lots of kids have messy bedrooms. So if you have a child that has a messy bedroom, I don't want you to listen to this and think, oh, they've got problems with language. When we're assessing and evaluating language, what we do is bring lots and lots of pieces of evidence together to form a picture of the child's performance. So one thing on its own is not enough for you to be concerned. Okay, so we often find that children with language difficulties, especially expressive language, will have rambling expression. They will have long sentences that go on and on and on and on, but they don't make much sense, and they don't have many words in them. A lot of the words are repeated over and over again. And because they have difficulties with word finding, they tend to use lots of fillers. So they'll say things like thingy over and over again, or ujimi, or what's it. They'll use those words as substitutes. So that again is a red flag for us when we see that. They might not be joining words together very well. They can miss words out in sentences, or sometimes they get the words in the wrong order. Another thing that we see all the time in children that have language disorders rather than just language delays is that they don't appear to use many verbs, and they can struggle with understanding verbs. So they either don't use many verbs, or they use their verbs in the wrong way. So instead of saying things like I ran, you'll hear them saying I runned. So they overuse that ed ending that we sometimes have on some verbs. We also see that they can have difficulties with pronouns such as I, she, you, he, we, and they just avoid using them. Sometimes we see that these children also have difficulties with prepositions, so things like in, on, under, and that's because they have quite poor concept development. So when I'm thinking about a concept, I mean big, small, rough, smooth. What is a tree? So you understand the concept of what a tree is. It's a plant, it grows in the ground, it has branches, it has a trunk, it has leaves on it, the leaves fall off. Children with language issues really struggle with those concepts. So, once again, if your child has just one of these difficulties that I've talked about, it's not necessarily a cause for concern. If you're noticing that they are doing many of these things I've talked about, or they're not able to do the things that they should be by their age, that is a cause for concern. And I would really urge you to see a speech and language therapist and have your child assessed further. So I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching today. Check out some of my other videos because I'm doing a whole series of them, really just to inform parents so that they've got as much knowledge and information as possible. So thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.